Julian's editor called at 9 at night to say his new novel was the best thing he's ever written. I wrote every word of it. He was in the shower, humming, the way he does when he thinks he's finally arrived somewhere real. I answered his phone myself, in the voice I'd used to sell that exact sentence to 4 different editors over 15 years, and said, "He'll be so glad to hear that." It was true. He would be. He always was. I met Julian Ashcroft in a graduate workshop where he read 11 pages about a fishing trip with his father and made 3 grown adults cry. I sat 2 seats down thinking, this is competent, and it will never be more than competent unless someone gets their hands on it. I got my hands on it, not right away, eventually. He had the thing publishers actually buy, and it isn't talent, it's a story about yourself that sounds true, even polished within an inch of its life. Rural childhood, a father who didn't talk enough, a mother who died at exactly the right dramatic age. He could tell that story out loud and make an editor's eyes go wet. He could not, under any circumstances, put it on the page in a way that did what his voice did in a room. I could. From the first book, the whole arrangement fit in one sentence. Julian sold the room. I built the thing the room fell for. His first deal came from 40 pages and a pitch meeting where he made the acquiring editor cry twice. He had 11 months to deliver. At month 9, he had 60 unusable pages and a full-blown panic that showed up at my apartment at 11 at night, asking me to read what he had and tell him honestly if it was any good. It wasn't. I told him so. Then I told him where the actual book was hiding inside it, and by month 11 I had rewritten it start to finish, every sentence. His name went on the cover. Mine went nowhere, not because he insisted on that first time, because I offered. It was his contract, his advance, his career. I told myself I was helping a friend through one bad stretch, one time, as a favor. That was 15 years and 6 books ago. The favor never found a natural stopping point. I kept finding one for it. We split every advance and every royalty check down the middle, an arrangement made in a kitchen in our 2nd year together, sealed with a promise and a bottle of wine we couldn't afford yet. No contract, no lawyer. We were partners, and partners don't put a thing like that on paper. I want you to notice something in that sentence, because it matters for everything that comes after. Nothing was on paper, which meant that whenever he decided to stop honoring an arrangement that existed only in 2 people's memory of a kitchen, there was nothing stopping him. Not for the new work. Not, if he ever chose to be bold about it, for the 6 books already sitting on shelves with only his name on the spine. I understood that risk for a long time before he ever tested it. The books did well. Then they did extraordinarily well. By book 4, Julian Ashcroft was a name that got a profile in a real magazine, a face that photographed well beside a bookshelf. Somewhere in there, he started believing the profile. I remember the exact party, his publisher's holiday event, book 5 just out, a room full of people who mattered in that particular small world. Someone I didn't know asked what I did, and Julian, arm around my shoulder, 3 drinks in, glowing, said, "Maren keeps me sane. Honestly, I don't know what I'd do without her. She's basically my rock." His rock. 15 years, 6 novels, and in front of a room of industry people, I was a geological feature, load-bearing, decorative, present. I smiled. I said something gracious. I went home and reread the acknowledgments in his last book, which thanked in order. His agent, his editor, his mother's memory, and then, 4th, 1 clause, no last name, M, for everything. For everything. 4 words filed after his dead mother. Isla Bennett arrived the way these things arrive. A junior publicist on his book tour. 29, sharp, genuinely funny, and completely convinced that the man giving those interviews was the one who'd written those books. More than once within my hearing, she told him his voice was the thing that got her, the rhythm of his sentences, the way he built an ending. She meant my rhythm, my endings. Nobody had ever told her whose hands actually built the thing she'd fallen for. I don't think Julian corrected her. By then, I think he'd started believing it himself. He left in the spring, 8 months after that party, with the specific cowardice of a man who waits until the contract for the next 3 books is signed before he tells you the marriage is over. He was careful about the order of operations. I noticed that. By then, noticing things was the entire shape of my life. The trilogy deal was the biggest of his career, 3 books, more zeros than I'd ever watched him earn on his own, built by his new agent around a bold new direction for his voice as a solo artist. I read that phrase in a trade announcement, sitting in an apartment he still, technically, half-owned. He called 2 weeks later, pleasant, businesslike, the tone you'd use finalizing a former employee's severance. "I think it's time I find my own way into this next chapter," he said. "Creatively, I want it to actually be mine." "It's always been yours, Julian," I said. "That was the entire problem." He didn't catch it. He rarely did. He told me he'd be working with someone new for the trilogy. He also mentioned, in the tone of an afterthought that wasn't one, that he'd been experimenting with some writing software. Just for pacing, nothing serious. I've read what that software produces. It writes like a confident parrot. I didn't say that out loud. I wrote it down because it was a good line, and old habits don't leave just because the person who benefited from them did. Then he told me the arrangement, his word, 15 years reduced to a single bloodless noun, was finished. No more 50% going forward. No acknowledgement in anything new. A clean break, he said. Better for everyone. "And the 6 books already out?" I asked. "The ones people are still buying right now this month?" A pause, just slightly too long. "Let's not make this complicated, Maren." That pause told me he'd already thought about it. He'd already priced out exactly how much of the last 15 years he could quietly stop paying for, the moment it suited him. He did not know how much I'd priced out too. From the 2nd book onward, I recorded our working sessions. Not from suspicion, not at first. I recorded because he'd talk for 2 hours and produce 4 usable sentences buried in 40 minutes of tangent, and I got tired of trying to remember which 4. I told him every time. He never once asked why, because it never occurred to him the answer might someday matter to anyone but me. 11 years of audio, Julian at his kitchen table, unable to find the end of a sentence. Julian asking on tape across 4 different books, "Just give me a line, anything, I'm stuck." Julian saying about his own supposed masterpiece in his own recorded voice, "I don't actually know what happens next. That's kind of your department." Your department? There was something better than the audio, too. Something I hadn't hidden from him so much as simply never handed him, which is not the same thing, whatever he'd like to call it later. I write everything longhand first. Every draft, every book, 15 years of yellow legal pads in my own handwriting, dated, sitting in a storage unit he'd never once thought to ask about, because he'd never once wondered where his own novels came from before they arrived typed, under his name, ready to be signed. 15 years of first drafts in my hand, dated months ahead of publication, for 6 different books. That isn't circumstantial evidence. That's a paper trail with my handwriting as the ink. I want to be clear about what I did next, because this isn't the version of the story where the wronged woman gets even by watching things collapse from a careful distance. I went and made things happen, on purpose, out loud. I called a journalist I respected, Priya Oduya, who covers publishing with the specific joy of someone who enjoys watching a myth take a real hit, and told her I had a story. Then I showed her everything. The recordings, the legal pads, 15 years of dates, lined up in order against 6 published books that made one man famous for a voice he had never once produced without me in the room. She asked if I wanted to run it the standard way, give his publisher notice, let them respond first. I said no. I told her exactly when I wanted it to run. The Corbin Prize for Fiction was airing its ceremony live in 3 weeks, streamed to more people than had ever read one of Julian's actual books. His current novel, the one I had, in fact, written, was a finalist. He was expected to win. Run it that night, I said. During the broadcast, not before, not after, during. Priya looked at me for a long moment. That's a genuinely vicious piece of timing. I've had 15 years to think about it, I said. The piece went live at 8:52 p.m., 19 minutes into a broadcast where Julian sat in the 3rd row in a very good jacket, waiting for a category that had already become an open secret in that room. Priya's outlet ran the audio itself, embedded in the article, playing automatically the moment anyone opened it. 22 seconds of Julian, live and unmistakable, saying, "Just give me a line, anything, I'm stuck." Beside it, 4 photographs of yellow legal pads, my handwriting, dated 11 months ahead of the corresponding book's release. It didn't stay contained to the article. Within 11 minutes, that 22 seconds was moving through the same phones sitting in the laps of people at the ceremony itself. I watched it happen from my apartment, on 3 screens, the way you'd watch weather arrive. At 9:14, his category was announced. He'd won. He was already reaching for his own phone as he stood. He got through the first sentence of his acceptance speech. Something about gratitude, a version of which he'd said at every award he'd ever collected. A sentence I'd probably drafted the bones of once, years earlier, for a different night. And then a text alert lit his phone in his hand, on camera, in front of everyone. I watched his face, do the thing a face does when 15 years arrives all at once and doesn't knock first. The room had already started to know. You could see it move through the tables the way weather moves, phones tilting toward each other, applause thinning into something closer to recalculation. He said something about technical difficulties. He never finished the speech. His publisher didn't pause the trilogy. Within 4 days, they canceled it outright, and their lawyers sent a letter demanding he return the advance in full, money he had, by then already spent believing it belonged to him. His agent dropped him by the end of that week, in a 2-line email that made the trade papers before Julian saw it himself. He tried once to come at me, a lawsuit, something about breach of confidence, something his own attorney apparently warned him would go nowhere before he filed it anyway. It went nowhere. Truth is a complete defense against defamation, and everything Priya had published was, unfortunately for him, entirely true. He lost that too, publicly, which is its own kind of consequence. A second news cycle, a second wave of the exact humiliation he'd started the first one trying to outrun. And then came the part I actually wanted, the part money never touches. His publisher agreed, in the settlement that ended the whole ugly business, to reissue all 6 existing books with a corrected byline. Every future printing, forever, credits the cover the way it always should have. By Julian Ashcroft and Maren. Not an acknowledgment buried after his mother's memory. My name, the same size as his, on the front, on every copy sold from that day forward, for as long as those books stay in print. The same publisher that had just eaten the loss on Julian's advance signed my own novel 3 weeks later, in a 5-way auction, for considerably more than they'd been paying him per book. I hadn't hidden this one from anyone. I'd been building it for 2 years on the same legal pads, in the same hand, about a woman who spends 15 years constructing a house with someone else's name on the deed. I did not mention the irony of the timing to my new editor. Someone else did, in an interview a few weeks later, and I let the quote run exactly as I gave it. It felt fitting. I've always been good at knowing what a room actually paid for. 6 months after the ceremony, a courier left a box on my doorstep, advance copies of the reissue, the first books in 15 years to arrive at my door instead of his. I opened it standing in the hallway, still in my coat, and there it was. The cover I had built the sentences for, 5 separate times over 5 separate years, my own name finally sitting on it in the same size type as his, the same weight of ink. I didn't cry. I want to say that plainly, because it would be easy to end the story there and let you assume I did. I stood in my hallway and ran my thumb along the raised letters of my own name on a cover for the first time in 15 years, and what I felt was closer to a held breath finally let go. Then I made tea, and I sat down, and I opened my own book. My new one, the one nobody's name is on but mine, and I kept writing. Thanks for listening. If any part of this found you somewhere true, tell me in the comments. I read every one. And if you've spent years building the thing someone else gets applauded for, put your name on it. Today, if you can. The correction is always more satisfying loud than it ever is quiet, I checked.